the root of the problem is that we are questioning our identity and God's authority. And that informs so much about our life. When we live in pride, we live in comparison, we live in insecurity, we live in entitlement. Because outside, the church world, pride is a positive. You should be proud of yourself. You should be confident in those things. And then in the upside down world of the Christian faith, it is just, it's a little bit different than that. It's you should be as Jesus did and who, humbled himself to the point of death on the cross.
Welcome to the Hope in Real Life podcast with Jason Gore. Our team is passionate and committed to bringing you more hope in the everyday, real areas of your life. If this conversation and content is valuable for you, please do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and even share. You never know how valuable it could be to share a little bit of hope with someone else. Let's get the conversation started. What's going on, Hope in Real Life family? So glad to be here with you on this episode where we are talking about pride. Now, look, before you turn this off, let me say this really quickly. If you think I don't need to hear a conversation about pride, you might want to stick around just a little bit longer, okay? I'm here with my good friend, Matt Curtis, co-host, Bradford Mitchell. I paused because I said in our last two episodes that we filmed that we had David Goggins here to talk about self-control.
You're trying to think of somebody else.
Dr. Phil here to talk about love. I don't really know who the person is. I can't say Jesus. I can't say it. Can't say it. Big topic of conversation, man. It pervasive in our culture, whether we know it or not. Bradford.
Yeah.
What do you got for us?
Pride's an interesting thing. It's one of those things that, like, we probably would look at somebody else pretty easily and be like, they're a little prideful.
Yeah.
But it's at times that we don't, at least I'll say it, maybe don't leave me hanging out on the ledge, boys. But I think it's hard for me to recognize when I'm being prideful.
Yeah.
And about the one person that
we actually brought your wife into the studio.
I was literally about to say the one person that won't make me fume with anger if something is said about how I'm reacting is actually my wife. If you want to know more about that, you should check out the episode we did on love.
Okay, all right.
But okay, so we got to start at the basis. What would pride be? What do we identify that as? And I think everybody kind of knows, but let's just start that as a baseline before we get going.
Yeah. Matt, you want to take a swing first, or you want me to jump out of the gate?
Oh, sure. Let it rip.
New guy. Let's go.
I am a new guy. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Matt
Curtis, good friend of mine, campus pastor at our Fuquay campus of our church. And actually, not to make you prideful about this, but in my mind, you carry yourself as one of the more humble guys.
I thought I was a subject matter expert on pride. That's what I came here for.
And humility.
So why don't you go and unveil
Matt
pride?
Curtis's,
what do we got?
Matt Curtis's new book, Humility, and How I Achieved It.
If I could come in and do this, and she, time and date, and I said, sure. My schedule says yes, my insecurity says no, and I said, what are we talking about? And she said, well, pride and insecurity. Said, oh, all right, here we are. No, I think pride it's a wicked thing, and it is. It's everybody has some element of pride. I think whenever, you can see back into the garden, that's where pride happens. I think anytime we act in pride, the root of the problem is that we are questioning our identity and God's authority. And that informs so much about our life. When we live in pride, we live in comparison, we live in insecurity, we live in entitlement. Because outside, the church world, pride is a positive. You should be proud of yourself. You should be confident in those things. And then in the upside down world of the Christian faith, it is just, it's a little bit different than that. It's you should be as Jesus did and who, humbled himself to the point of death on the cross.
Yeah. And just for our listeners that might not spend a whole lot of time reading the Bible, what Matt said was you see it in the garden. So in the Bible, like in the very beginning, when God creates the heavens and the earth, he puts Adam and Eve, his first two created beings, in a garden and says, hey, you can eat from any tree, anything in the garden that you want except for this one thing, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then the serpent shows up, the bad guy, and basically says, listen, no. You're not going to die if you eat from this. God just knows if you eat from it, you're going to be like him. And so then they start to believe this lie that maybe they know better than God.
Right.
And if you ever get to a place where you think maybe you know better than God,
Check
that's
yourself.
probably the time to think maybe
Before
I'm
you wreck
struggling with
yourself.
pride. Yeah. For me, I think pride is just this, the ugly rearing of its head of a conflated or overinflated view of self.
Yeah.
And we look at,
Dang, that's good.
well, when you live enough years, and by God's grace, hopefully I'll have many more, but you see it and you experience it and you look in the mirror long enough and you're like, oh, I know what your problem is. But, because you even said the word confidence. I mean, the truth is we do need confidence. I mean, even as a coach for other people, you want people to have confidence, but it's having confidence in the right things,
Right.
in the right places, in the right spaces. And I would even say, having confidence in your ability to listen and hear feedback from other people and be able to run it through a good filter is important. But yeah, when we have this overinflated, this conflated view of self, that's when things start breaking down. That's when we start getting into places of, well, I think I'm pretty good at this. I deserve, and this person should, and this person should, and should meet my needs. And man, you see things go south pretty quickly.
Yeah. I think there's a couple different definitions of pride. And I particularly want to ask you, Jason, because both of you are parents, your dads, so there's that aspect of this. But there's like pride as a heart posture, like we're talking about like how maybe the world views it. Like I'm amazing, I'm awesome, I know my stuff. That's kind of what we're getting at. We'll get there. But what would you say, like how is it different when we tell the kids we coach? Like let's talk about that real quick. Like how is that okay? What's the difference in like saying you have pride for your children or the kids on your team? Yeah. Like, cause that's a different thing. That's a completely different thing. So what would you say, like as a coach, how do you kind of like draw that line or balance that?
I think you separate them out in terms of if pride and confidence are different in that you do have confidence in your abilities. You do have confidence that I would say, like as followers of Christ, I'd say our confidence should be in what God can do through us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer you follow Christ, you realize, hey, that actually means that I'm not all that great. The Bible tells us is when we're at our weakest that God steps in and brings his strength and we're the strongest. And so, but with an athlete or when we're doing anything at work, whether it's working on a presentation, going in front of our boss, you do need to know, like, hey, I'm here because I have something to say. God did not create me void of any gifting, purpose, responsibility to fulfill. Like he created me for a reason. And so realizing, no, I am here for a purpose. I can have confidence in that purpose. I can have confidence in my giftings. My dad used to say a dog that won't wag his own tail ain't worth having. And to some degree, you need to know, like, you do have some purpose. But I would say the line gets drawn when it starts negatively impacting other people around you or forces you to take a negative view of other people. And so
There it is.
when you start to believe yourself so great that you don't have to listen to, take feedback from, recognize your interdependence on the other people around you, I think that's when like, wait a minute, okay, maybe pride is starting to sneak into that confidence has moved to a prideful place that's going to lead to some negative results.
Yeah. So being proud of someone is more about confidence and encouragement versus when you act proud yourself, and then you start causing damage and
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So what would y'all say is, like, why is it harmful? Like let's like unpack that part. Like what can end up happening if we go down there? Because I know for me, I'm a visual learner. Yep. So explaining to me, don't press the red button and just, that's all you say. I'm like, yeah, but now I need to know what happens.
Right.
So what would we kind of say is the reasons why? I think it's maybe obvious, but again, I think it's important to really like lay it out so we know what's happening.
I'll go and then I'll let Matt. I mean, at the end of the day, I would say what pride does is it destroys lives. Mm-hmm. I mean, period. Now because we've jumped to the end of the conversation. Let's
That's
put,
true.
So
That's
go
true.
ahead, push the button. What happens?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it destroys lives because we get to this place where we start to really believe our ways are always the best, that we're more important than other people need to bow down to us. Our personal preferences are more important. That takes away our ability to go through life with this we over me attitude, which is necessary. When I say we over me, I mean like the collective we is more important than my own personal preferences. But man, if if you write and read your own press clippings long enough, that can take you to a place to where you're standing there by yourself.
Right.
And whether that's a broken marriage, a broken home, an organization where people don't want to follow you, a family filled with a wife and a kids that don't respect you because you haven't shown them the love and care that they actually deserve, man, that's a dark place.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pride is such a insulated experience. It's isolated. It's you against the world. And even if you have things to be confident about, things that you're proud of. I mean, I am extremely proud to be married to my wife. I'm proud of my kids. At the same time, pride, I think, bleeds into this spider web of other problems to where, I've got 2 kids, 9 and 7, and I'm proud to be their father. I'm proud of them. And at the same time, I will look at my kids and their academic struggles, and I'll compare them to other people. And I think, what am I doing wrong that they're having a hard time with basic math? I look at their, socialization. He has a few friends. Why doesn't he have more friends?
Yeah.
And we just start to expand out this comparison game of like, why am I not doing something right? Which bleeds into like some insecurities as me as a father. I don't know if you've experienced this as a parent, but you even compare your own parenting to how you were parented. Well, my dad wouldn't put up with this crap.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
It's okay. It is now. But so how should I respond? But I'm a unique individual. I'm different than my father was. It's a different home. It's a unique family. And pride can destroy those things if I just go, this is how I'm supposed to react.
Yeah.
Based on some kind of expectation that's probably not even true.
Matt, you mentioned your home. You mentioned your kids. I'd love if you'd be willing to share a story. Like, what's the most prideful thing Jillian's ever done?
I'm not. Man, let me tell you this. My wife was pulled over yesterday by
he's
police.
doing it.
Man.
Okay.
It's not prideful. This is the confidence my wife has in herself. She's pulled over a bunch of different people. It was like a, what do they call it whenever everybody's getting pulled over?
Traffic stop?
Speed trap. It was a speed trap.
Okay.
She got busted. Man, she was so fired up because she was not wrong. My wife has a ton of confidence. I don't know if you're trying to turn that on me and share a story of my own pride.
No. I just thought it would be funny to actually ask the question and see if you'd be silly enough to go down that road.
That's how we roll.
Okay, so Jason's done that to me a couple times too. So
He's good.
All right. So I think the obvious thing here is the opposite of pride would be humility. Mm-hmm. So let's if we're feeling, there's a lot of directions we could take this thing. So opposite of pride, then humility. What does that look like to you?
A guy by the name of Tim Keller wrote a book one time, and I cannot remember the name of it. We'll try to track it down and put it in the show notes. Great little read. But he talks about, and this is really where I got the realization of what I said earlier, pride, confidence sneaks over into pride when it obviously starts impacting how you view other people. Mm-hmm. So this conflated view of yourself and the constantly thinking of yourself makes you think of others less. Mm-hmm. But he said humility and what we should seek, it's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less.
Yeah. That's good.
And when we're focusing our attention on other people and this interdependence that we all have with one another, it takes your eyes off of yourself. And so now you're not asking the same questions anymore. You're not approaching the game, so to speak, with the same mentality of my personal preferences, my desires, how does this benefit me? And you're thinking about, hey, how can I confidently use the talents, abilities, giftings, hard work that I put in, ultimately for all the people around me to accomplish what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom of self-forgetfulness?
Yep, that's it.
The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness by Tim Keller.
Man.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt?
What was the question?
We're talking about
Benefits
pride.
of
The
humility?
opposite of pride would most assuredly be humility.
Not the power of forgetfulness, the
Not
power
that.
of self-forgetfulness.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Man, well played. No, I think humility is, it's hard. I think it is extremely hard to live a life of humility because just in our nature, we think we deserve things that we don't necessarily deserve. We think we've earned things. We are in our nature, I think, entitled. And a lot of times I feel like, especially culturally, we'll look at a younger generation, Gen Z, and then just broadly say, man, these kids can't do nothing. They're spoiled. Think about the greatest generation, which somebody told me this morning about that. And you're like, man, all of us have a sense of privilege that we do not understand, to be breathing the air, to be serving our families or leading different things. And humility is such a key, and you have to fight for it. You have to know who you are. There's so much wrapped up in identity. If my identity is in my job, in my resources, money in the bank, the house that I have, the cars that I have, influence that I have, all of that will destroy you. And it is hard to fight for the right mentality about thinking of others more than yourself.
Man, so let's just go down that track. You're talking about like culture and what it looks like today. I mean, there's Instagram, social media overall. It's like people, we only show our highlights, right? And culture kind of just shows that like winning is what is important in life. So culture's view of pride versus like what we would say is more important is the scriptural view of how we should hold ourselves.
Sure.
Let's go down there, because like you set that up perfectly with, I have these cars, I have these things, this other generation. I mean, that's just, I've experienced it in some ways too. Like, seeing other people talk like that to me, all this stuff. Jason, you look like you were either ready to go.
I think with, if we're talking about from a biblical perspective, at the end of the day, you can't go through Scripture and then not look in the mirror and realize, hey, all of us are broken. All of us have our junk. None of us are perfect. And I've I've heard it said many times, the ground is very level at the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
And so when you go through life, if you can go through life with this perspective of, listen, my brokenness is ultimately what led to the Son of God hanging on a cross and dying for the forgiveness of my sins. It's hard for me to stand in the presence of Matt Curtis and really believe that I'm all that better than he is. Because the reality is we're both jacked up. We're both broken. We're both beat up. We've all got inadequacies. And so I think that mentality is what's going to ultimately lead us away from a prideful, I know better than God, and so therefore everybody else that I interact with in life, and realize, no. I actually had to be saved from myself. I don't even have the ability to save myself.
Yeah.
And so how do I really think that I have the ability to know what's best, or to be better than everybody else around me?
Yeah. Wow.
And to your question, social media, you look at the story of Zuckerberg and why they started this stuff. It was to connect people to one another. And it's poison. It just divides us. We see what's going on somebody else's life on a different trip in a different place doing different things. And it's the highlight reel. And we compare ourselves to that. And and then we start thinking of ourselves differently and making different efforts to accomplish things, trying to impress people that we don't even know.
Yeah.
On a relational level. So that's all
I'm pretty sure our next episode is actually going to be on comparison and kind of the trap of comparison.
Yeah.
And so we'll dig deeper into that, in the next episode. So if you're intrigued by
setup.
if you're intrigued by that,
there you go.
Just finish this episode and then you can jump right over.
Hang tight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's important when we do this too. We're talking about what it is, what we shouldn't do, and all that. And we try to do this in every episode if we're addressing some like big topic, like practical things. And it's real easy to say like, follow Jesus. But I think back to the red button thing, like I need practical ways myself. What would be, anybody got some practical ways to identify and or address pride?
Yeah, I do. I think so. But I want to say something though, and let's come back to that just before we switch gears completely. And this is why this is important, because and there is a tension. Even what you just said about social media a minute ago, Matt, what's happened in our culture is, as opposed to people spending time in a dialogical format like this, just sitting around talking and hearing different and multiple perspectives, we now spend more time I mean, we legitimately, look, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. Most Americans, Bradford, most Americans spend more time in their social media feeds than they do in dialogue.
Yeah.
Well, what our social media feeds do with an algorithm is put us in echo chambers that make us think that everybody that's saying, thinking the way that we do is all in agreement. And so therefore, then when we go out into the real world, well, it's not really like that, okay? And so it's diminished our ability to do that. So one, you just got to recognize that. Like we live, so we can talk about taking practical steps, but it is going to be hard.
Yeah.
We're fighting against a lot. That's one thing. The other thing I read, I don't remember who sent it to me, but I was reading an article the other day that's like, it was pointing out how the majority of the top leaders in just about every industry would show some pretty significant traits or traits in the areas of ego and even narcissism. And so there is something to being that confident and borderline prideful, like to the point, like narcissism is like this idea of living in a false reality. Like so much so when you speak things, it's like an alternate universe, but you speak about it with so much confidence, you really believe it yourself. To the point of when other people don't believe you, it's almost like, well, gaslight them because they're clearly not living in this reality. When the truth is, that's not even the real world. But we see those types of traits push people to the top. And then, I mean, then you can start to develop like a true borderline personality disorder of that's what I'm supposed to do if I'm supposed to be successful.
Right.
We don't see the Jesus of Nazareth saying, well, I'm going to be willing to turn away from my throne in heaven, come down to earth. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to turn away from, yes, I could establish a kingdom on earth right now. Yes, I'm going to call down angels to pull me off a cross and willingly lay down their life. We don't see that. That's not what's modeled right now in standard leadership.
Yeah.
And we don't even need to get into the current political scene right now, right, to see that. So let's get into some practicals, but let's also realize you got to be serious about this because you got a lot of stuff coming at you saying that ain't the way to do it.
Oh yeah, and I don't think we could talk for hours about this idea of pride. And I mean, you see the example of Lucifer. He was like a worship leader in like heaven, basically, got full of himself. There's parallels you could draw there. And like he fell from heaven. It's pretty intense. Like, I mean, the Bible is full of description after description of people who showcased how pride got the best of them. So, I mean, just if we're talking about anything, baby steps, just to identify and to kind of help combat, even in the littlest way, like what we could do, because it's hard.
You got to have people around you that are willing to speak the truth to you.
Yeah.
You got to have people in your life that are willing to say, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to give you a different perspective, or I'm going to remind you that your stuff does stink every now and then.
Right.
Some of us call that person our wives. And so, but I mean, I'm telling you, I've met men before that have wives that act like their husbands are God's gift to this world.
Yeah.
And on one hand, there's some places where that's very important. And
Her name is Jillian.
But
That's
I mean,
Matt's wife.
in those moments, like I've also seen that do some really dangerous things to guys as well. And so, like, really creating an environment where people close to you in life can speak into you.
Yeah.
And that means oftentimes, like, to not only listen, but to go against what you originally thought or said. That's a learned behavior that when you do, but when you start to do that, and then you see, oh, wait a minute, there was a payoff of trust in that, and there was some benefit from it, then it makes it all the more easy. So I would say being willing to have some people around you that will speak the truth to you, and that you actually listen to what they say, is a great first step.
Yeah. It could be, you're saying that the first thing I thought, it's like, I think part of why it's hard for us to listen to other people speak into us is something against us. And I know, like, for me, that's like my thought. Like, if I feel like somebody's trying to help me, I'm thinking that they think that I'm a terrible person. When in actuality, like, if we were to just receive that, like, that person's not worth listening to if the reason they're trying to help you is for their own benefit. And that's a different thing.
Sure.
But like receiving help and checks and balances in our life, like if we're like in an echo chamber that you're talking about, or we got blinders on, we're missing out on growth and opportunities and for deeper relationships. Like there's a lot of things that can spring from just being okay with letting people speak into our lives. And that's something I struggle with directly, just to be real. It's just letting other people speak into my life.
Yeah, I think, to intentionally pursue humility, what it ends up doing is it removes the transactional part of relationships. I trust you. You can speak into my life, and I don't need anything from you. Or I'm living a life where I'm here to help you. I'm here to make my wife's life better, the people I lead, my community better. How can I serve you guys? And that it's an identity stuff, but it removes pride from you, but it takes a sense of intentionality around humility. And that way you're not, as Keller said, whatever he said about thinking of others more.
Yes, that's right.
You guys got anything else? I just want to we can't be here for like 3 hours, but I mean, there's lots of things we could attack.
I think another thing that we can do is actually spend some time recognizing our own weaknesses and inadequacies. Be honest with ourselves. Like look in the mirror and really do business with. And that might mean, taking out a little pad and say, look, these are my insecurities. Like, what am I actually insecure about? And that takes reflection. But when you get to a place where you can actually see what your insecurities are, most of our pride does come out of our insecurities.
Yeah.
I mean, not to go back to the Bible, but at the end of the day, what Adam and Eve were concerned about is, what if God really is holding out on me?
Yeah.
Like that was an insecurity. What if there really is something better? And so we've got to be true to ourselves first and foremost. We've got to recognize what our weaknesses are, what our fears are. And that's going to help us when we see those things plain as day and we look at them. That's going to help us realize, okay, wait a minute. I might have some liabilities here, and some pride is going to stem out of these if we're not careful.
I think that's good. I think you got to question your own motives. Self-awareness does not come natural.
Right.
It's intentional. I think journaling is good. I think asking yourself questions about motives is a good practice to participate in.
And I meant, let me give you even a further practical one, Bradford. You said, because I said having some people around you, you got to take that a step further. There's a lot of power in looking at someone face to face and asking this question: what's it like on the other side of the table as me? And be ready, because you might not like what you hear. You're probably going to hear some good things, but guess what? You are human. Like you are not perfect. And so if you're really asking the question, just ask somebody and then tell them ahead of time, I'm not going to fight back. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to explain anything.
Scary.
But what's it like on the other side of the table is me?
You got to set it up. I'm not going to be defensive here.
That's right.
Lay it on me, though.
And then you have to not be defensive if you want that person to be honest with you the next time.
True.
Yes. Dang.
How's that?
So what's it like sitting on the other side of the table for me, literally right here, right now?
It's great. You got such a soothing voice and you're guiding the conversation so well.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
All right, so let's hit this idea here. What can pride rob us of? I don't think we've hit that. Like, what are the consequences? I guess is another thing too. Like, what can it do?
We said it earlier. I mean, it'll destroy your life. I think it'll take everything from you. If you're functioning out of a place of a heightened level of self-importance, and you're putting yourself in position of, I am just trying to serve myself in every aspect and get as much influence or accomplishments or stuff or whatever in my life, you're just working against yourself entirely. I think it'll steal joy, happiness, and then, I mean, the consequences of that, you're looking for fulfillment continually, and you're not going to find it.
I think what the consequences of it are is that you're just left with you. Because at the end of the day, pride says, I am the most important. I am always right. And it's my way or the highway. And I know best. And I'm going to pursue what's best for me at all cost. And at the end of that road, if you write that story and you turn enough pages, at the end of this is all about me, what you're left with is you. And man, what you're robbing yourself of is the beauty and the joy of experiencing life with other people, honestly, in the manner in which we were created to experience life. And so you actually might be able to be that narcissistic leader that we talked about earlier and accomplish some great things. But then at the expense, was that thing that you accomplished really worth being there all by yourself?
Yeah.
And so, man, that's a lonely place to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes we tell ourselves this lie that because I know people. I know people.
What's her name?
I know a guy that has a beard
naming names,
and a hat, and he wears flannel a lot in the winter. My tendency sometimes when things get hard is to put on this cape of, well, unless I get it done, unless I do it, it's me against the world. And to a degree, that does give you some gas to get it done. But truthfully, we all only have so much gas in the tank.
Yeah.
And that's a lonely place to be.
Yeah.
And I've been there. And thankfully, you can sneak in and out of those seasons and find some healing from it.
Right.
But man, it's not the way we were created to live and experience life. That's not where true joy comes from.
Right.
And so, and you live into that too much, and you put on that pride hat, and you start thinking you're the martyr and it's you against the world.
Right.
You're gonna have some problems, man. We're not made to live life that way.
Yeah.
The phrase that has come to mind, I wasn't going to say it, but you said, you've capitalized on it a few times. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And it's it's not directly related, but I still it's just very important. Everything we talk about on this show, I think could be brought back to spending time with other people, having accountability, spending time learning about who Jesus is. I think those are the two big things, how you improve on all these things we're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's no 5 steps to eliminating pride in your life. That's not it. It's a day-to-day thing. But again, we look in the Bible and Jesus says to deny yourself daily, to pick up your cross daily. It's a daily thing that you have to recognize that I can't and shouldn't do this by myself. I can't and shouldn't be the most important person in this world. If I were to be real, even though I like doing things on my own, I don't want to be by myself. And I sure as heck can't do everything on my own anyways.
Right.
So
start looking for validation from other people. One anecdote that I actually read this week, I might butcher the story, but it's John Maxwell's 21, what's it called?
Irrefutable laws of leadership.
I messed you up because I told you something else
on it. He tells a story of the race to get to the South Pole, and it's in the law of navigation. Leaders navigate; they know where they're going. Right. And there's these two different groups that are trying to get to the South Pole first. And one guy, he's charted the course, looked at all the threats, the risks, everything. He's prepared his team well, and that team ends up finding success. And then this other bunch. They did not chart the course out that well. They added a fifth member of their team to get there. On the way, they lost their dogs, and they keep pushing forward out of pride to get to this accomplishment that's target on the wall. By the time they get there, they're collecting whatever they went down there to collect, and they're bringing it back. And on the way back, every single one of them dies. And all the pushing forward of that, it led to the end of not just self, but the whole team. Wow. And I think that it's just an anecdote about what pride can get you.
Yeah, it's toxic. It's contagious. Yeah. Wow, that's good.
Hey, Bradford, before we sign off here, there's one thing. We've got a bullet point here that says the cost of pride, or overcoming pride and conflict, choosing reconciliation over winning. Mm. And I think that's important to realize, pride, we've talked about it in this abstract thing, but one other area where this really can come to life is in our relationships. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we get in places where probably someone made a statement, someone ran down a road, maybe they left before. I can even think of times in leadership. Let's go back to the law of navigation, which you just talked about. There's been times where I have probably ran too forward, too fast, or too far, too fast. And you know what, as a leader, to hear hey, I think you're running too far, too fast. You don't want to hear that.
No, you don't.
You don't want to hear that. But again,
Catch up.
Catch
you're
up.
going too slow.
Yeah, you're going too slow.
Yeah.
And even the thought of like, so now you're saying as a leader, I did something wrong for other people. Well, guess what? Yeah, you did. Everyone does.
Right.
Like it happens if you're a leader. And so actually taking the time to slow down and say, okay, if we're really going to go further, faster, we have to have some reconciliation. We have to address some of the stuff, some of the slip-ups along the way. I mean, let's say that all 5 of those guys on that trip that you just mentioned didn't die. 3 of them made it. Well, if they don't come back and do some business with what they did wrong and reconcile themselves to that truth with one another, and they set out to go on another adventure, well, now maybe next time only one of them comes back.
Right.
Now, their story obviously didn't work out that way. They didn't have an opportunity to learn, but just recognizing, you know what, running, and I've known some leaders who have had some error in judgment, probably out of pride. And look, pride is so sneaky. It's so sneaky because it comes out of success.
Right.
You make some key decisions. You do a few things. You experience success. Well, certainly I need to do that again. And certainly I need to do that again. And you guys haven't done this. So how do you know what's best? Right. And so it's this insidious thing that slowly sneaks in. And so it's understandable how leaders get to this point. I'm just telling you, we should at least show some sympathy, if not some empathy, for how it happens. But I've seen some leaders that get to them and then they blow everything up. But to not take the time to go back and reconcile and really say, this is where I think things went wrong. Where do you think things went wrong? And then, okay, now we can be unified in a path forward. Even if it's not together,
Right.
you're just setting yourself up to do the same thing over again.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if one person came back from that trip and said, well, 6 of my folks died, I'm just going to get 6 more to go with me, and we're going to do things the same way.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't reconciled with what got us to that place in the first place.
Yeah.
And so one thing that can really help break this cycle of something that's so sneaky and insidious is really taking the time to actually reconcile with people and with the steps that actually got you to where you are in the first place.
Yeah. I think that's really good.
And the last thing I would say really quickly is just know, again, that this happens very easily and it's a constant battle. And so if you find yourself in a place of like, holy cow, I have done this wrong. Look, we've all been there. And so this doesn't mean that you're disqualified. This doesn't mean that like you're a failure, but it's never too late to start taking the right steps.
Yeah, acknowledging it is more than most do. So the fact that you acknowledge that you messed up, you're in a way better spot.
100%.
So take some time, right? Reflect. What are my insecurities that I'm leading out of?
Yeah.
Ask some questions. What's it like on the other side of the table with me? And goodness gracious, heaven forbid, get to a place where you actually have to own it enough to apologize and ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, being willing to ask for forgiveness.
That's right.
First.
And now we've been freed of it and can actually move forward in a new direction.
Right.
I think people actually admire you more, which is ironic. People who are prideful want people to admire them and think that they're incredible people. This is not a blanket statement, but admitting you need help and asking, I know I admire people more for that than I do for somebody who thinks they know everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ironic that like when you let down your guard, you actually will probably get more people who trust you and like allow you to have influence over their life if you're more real than if you are, I'm the only one with the answers. So the great irony.
Yeah.
We got to watch out for a conflated view of self. We got to be sure in seeking humility that it's not we're thinking less of ourselves, but we are thinking of ourselves less. I know we got some resources down in the resources section. Would encourage you to check those out. Family, if this has been valuable content for you, I want to encourage you, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you'd like for us to follow up with you, we would love to do just that. Matt Bradford.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much for
Pleasure to have
My
you.
humble pleasure.
the wisdom and the insight. Love you guys. We will see you on the next episode as we spend some time talking about how to escape the comparison trap. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hope in Real Life podcast. If this content was valuable for you, don't forget, like, subscribe, share. You never know how important it could be to bring a little hope into someone else's life. There's even a place here for you to comment. We would love to hear from you and hear your feedback. Until next time, let's keep sharing hope.